No bizarre intros this time. I'm just gonna get straight to it. I usually like to do videos in parts, but I'm kind of in a rush, so I'm gonna do these two topics right now. And the first thing, I want to really be careful with my choice of words, with how this is going to be communicated on here, because it might be perceived the wrong way, especially when you read the title above. But the first topic I wanted to talk about stemmed from a video I watched on Wrestle Talk UK. I think that's the name of the channel on YouTube. And hold on a second, I'm trying to film here. Yeah, anyway, sorry about that. Let's hope the ice cream man doesn't stop by. Anyways, Rey Mysterio, there was a video about Rey Mysterio possibly retiring, or people talking about Rey Mysterio retiring, and if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's on, I think, the Wrestle Talk UK channel. So I was watching the video and it was interesting listening to what was being said, and it was kind of similar to what I felt. Now, I'm not calling for Rey Mysterio to retire. I'm not one of these people that's thinking, well, he's past his prime, I don't want to see him on the TV anymore. I don't have that kind of mindset when he's on Raw, SmackDown. I'm not fed up of seeing him. I actually enjoy seeing him, but they were bringing up the point about his knees, and God knows how many knee surgeries he's had. I think he's had quite a few. I remember when I first saw him wrestle when I was maybe 9 or 10, and he was having knee problems, and now, you know, many years later, I feel so old saying that, he's still having knee problems, and you can see the effect that it's had on him over the years, and how he's supposed to have had time off, and he's kept postponing it because the WrestleMania payoff's coming, or something to do with, like, you know, money has come into the equation. And I wouldn't be surprised if within the next 2 years we see less and less of him, and he slowly phases himself out, a lot like what's been happening with people like The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels and Triple H, where they do less and less and less, and you see them on some of the big shows, and then eventually they phase out. And I wouldn't be surprised, to tell you the truth, if within the next 2 years that happens with Rey Mysterio. And I just want to say, I think Rey is probably one of the, I think it's arguable, and I know people, if you want to debate this point I make, please write some comments or something, but I've always felt that Rey Mysterio was perhaps the best international wrestler or star from another completely different territory and style to come over to America and have had the most success. I don't think anyone will ever kind of get to the level that Rey was, and it's interesting because the WWE never fully pulled the trigger with Rey, even though when they put the world title on him, they didn't present him as the guy, so to speak. They always produced him as maybe the third or fourth most important guy on the show that he was on. And I don't think any other international star has been able to do what Rey did in America and adjust and transition so well. I think Justin Thunder Liger probably would be the other one, but he didn't have a long enough stay in America at times. And ability-wise, I think they're kind of there and there, although I know my good friend Great Liger will probably say Liger was better. But I mean, within America and the success and the respect level, I think that Rey just about surpasses Justin Thunder Liger. Great Muta would be another name, and I think that Rey ended up doing better and maybe surpassed Muta in the success that he had in America. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, and who knows, I know it's going to hurt the company if he does retire, and maybe that's one of the reasons why, you know, that's been postponed, because you think about it, Sin Cara hasn't taken off in the way that they would hope. They keep trying to create Latin American stars, but they're not trying hard enough. And it's not that they're not trying hard enough, they just haven't been able to find the right person or persons to be able to do it. And I think that's one of the reasons why Rey is staying on, because they rely on him so much to bring in that audience. Anyways, let me take a breather and take this water, and I'm coming right back. Okay, so the second thing I wanted to talk about was the best, or no, let's not use the word best. A lot of wrestling fans like to talk about who the most underrated wrestler is, the most underrated performer is, the most underrated worker is. And when I ever hear that topic, and I'm sure when people think of the topic, they think of someone like Christian, who, yeah, I could argue is maybe undervalued and underrated and probably not utilised enough. A lot of people would say someone like Evan Bourne or Kofi Kingston. Some people would say some of the TNA talent on their rosters. There's some guys that are underrated there. But when they think about underrated, I think they're thinking about the guy that's having excellent, and I admit excellent matches, but is not really being pushed. And I think, yeah, you might have a case there. I know a lot of people have said that about Sanjay Dutt. I know a lot of people have said that about Eddie Edwards in Ring of Honor. I know a lot of people have said that about guys outside of Ring of Honor, TNA and WWE. But the point is, in my opinion, the most underrated worker in all of pro wrestling right now, in my honest opinion, and I think it's going to surprise some people when I say the name, but when I explain it, you can kind of see where I'm coming from. But to me, the most underrated worker, wrestler in all of wrestling is, funnily enough, Joe Park's Abyss. So people are going to say, what are you talking about? He's getting a big push. What people don't realise is I'm trying to think of the right word that I'm going to use, and it's really bad having a block on YouTube when you're doing a video. It's supposed to be live. You've got to love live, straight to camera. But Joe Park's Abyss has such a range that a lot of wrestlers don't have, that it's actually really reminded me of how good he was. And when you go back to the very beginning, when he first appeared on TNA in the Nashville pay-per-views, and he was this again, he was this monster, this one-dimensional big man monster, Kid Cash's bodyguard. Eventually left Kid Cash, was being pushed as the monster in TNA, didn't speak, was just and making noises, and would come out with the chain across his neck. Had Jim Mitchell as his manager, which was a good idea, and I think they need to bring him back. But he had Jim Mitchell as his manager at the time, and the thing with monster characters in wrestling of that kind of cloth, whether it be Undertaker, Kane, or Abyss, you have to eventually, once you get to a certain point when they're slain, you have to add layers to the character and more things to the character. And they did that with Kane when he began to speak, and they began to go into his backstory more. They did things with the Undertaker as well. And then other times you get these monsters and they end up becoming comedy performers. And when they had Abyss in TNA and they made him the champion, and they had that feud with Sting, and they started adding layers to the character, and he eventually begins to talk, and he eventually begins to show other signs of a personality, and he becomes a sympathetic babyface character. It started to, I think, in some people's minds, kill the character a bit. And I didn't think it killed the character. I felt that it was still going strong. I felt that maybe after the Judas Messias stuff they did, when he went into a mental ward and then they brought him back, that's when I felt that the character was starting to become stagnant. And they tried other things with him, and then they made him kind of like Hulk Hogan's pet project, which, the Abyssomaniacs and Abyssomania. And granted, the guy's good at his job, but it really, really hurt the character. And then you fast forward to when he was with the Immortal Group, and then eventually he gets beaten up by Bubba Ray Dudley, and he disappears off TV for a while. You kind of, I was at that point, I was just so bored of seeing him. And then they do this angle where a clean-shaven man in a suit comes out and is claiming to be Abyss's brother. And you've got to love it for what it is, this campy but very entertaining, believable angle that it is. And I'm really impressed with how Joe Parks, Abyss, the man that's playing this role, I'm really impressed with how versatile he is. He can play the great big demonic evil monster that wants to destroy everyone in his path. But then when he's Joe Parks, and I'll give you an example, he came out as Joe Parks, and we're supposed to be under the belief that this is Abyss's brother. He's a shy, timid lawyer that has never been to a wrestling show in his life. That's part of the character. Now, a lot of other wrestlers and a lot of other great workers if they were given this role, would come out and they would just strut right marching out like, you know, this is not new to them, and, you know, doing all of this to the crowd, and yeah, woo, come on baby, and all of that. But Joe Parks comes out and he plays up to the fact that he's never been in an arena before, and he's coming out and he's nervous and he's sweating and he's a bit taken aback by the audience and the lights and everything, and he's not a violent person, and when every time Bubba Ray confronts him, he's a bit timid at first and he's kind of scared to stand up for himself, and then he attacks him back, and then he's kind of like, what am I doing, kind of thing. And it just builds the character, and it makes me think, beyond all the in-ring things that he does, the moves, the selling and all of that, those little things that he's doing, to me, are things that people aren't noticing enough and aren't giving him enough credit for. So I'm going to wrap it up and tell you that, in my opinion, Abyss is perhaps the most underrated worker in all of professional wrestling. And actually, if you go back and watch his match with Bubba Ray Dudley, again, when he kind of did that move on him and put him through the nails, and he's like, I can't believe what I'm doing, and the fans cheering like, yes, and he's like, no, don't cheer. Again, those small things really work, and it's better than a guy just hitting move after move after move after move, not doing anything to kind of work the crowd and the TV viewer, but, you know, hitting something and then doing something that would fit with the storyline and the character really shows me how good of a worker he is. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up. You write some comments. Number one, do you think that Rey Mysterio is going to retire in the next 2 years? And number two, do you think that Abyss, Joe Parks, is the most underrated wrestler? If not, tell me who you think is the most underrated wrestler in all of wrestling and explain why. And I will look forward to reading your comments. Take care, and I've got to run, so peace.